I remember when we used to take on rentals, we would be trying to find tenants for some of our landlords. We would say, okay, we're going to meet at 9 a.m. The tenant would show up. It's 9:01. We'd leave. We'd say, I'm sorry, you were late. You were late to this signing of the lease. We can't take you on as a tenant because if you're going to be late to signing the lease, you're going to be late on your rent. I remember that impacting me so much. And like, obviously, like 3 years later, I still remember it.
All right. So I'm here with Savannah Kessler. Okay. Used to be the director of ops, old time friend, the whole nine, sister, you know, you got the thing, right? You got all the accolades you could. Moved to DC about 2 months ago, 3 months ago. And now is back visiting, so we had to get you on the podcast. As you know, or maybe don't know, really the real lives of real estate, right? This whole podcast, the idea is to not do like a get rich quick scheme, but talk about, and when I'm happy you're on the podcast, is to really give like an honest look at what does real estate do? How does it impact behind the scenes, right? For you were like my EA, right? And my director of ops and Airbnb, everything. So I would love for us to deep dive into how real estate industry has impacted you. You didn't come from real estate background, we'll get into. And at the same time, how you saw it impact me and for better and for worse, right? And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So why not tell us a little bit? Now, I always like to ask, not where did you grow up, but what did you grow up in? Did you grow up in a house,
that's a great
apartment?
question. Yeah, so I grew up primarily in homes.
Okay.
My parents moved to upstate New York when I was a child, and so that's where I'm from. But we moved around a lot. My parents got divorced when I was young, and so with that, I was in and out of like my dad's house to my mom's house, my dad's house to my mom's house. We primarily grew up in homes. I don't remember a time actually ever living in an apartment. So my mom typically always rented. My dad had the house that they purchased when they moved there, but it was always a house.
Okay, so you were always housing it.
Yeah.
Okay, we talking like small house, big house, dilapidated,
Well, there's
McMansion.
5 kids in my family, so we needed a little bit more space. But the house that I would call like my childhood home was a fairly big house. We had 2 acres of land, like 4 or 5 bedrooms, 2 full baths. So it was a decently sized house with a lot of property.
And what town was this in?
This was in Blossville, New York.
Blossville?
Blossville.
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 Never heard of it.
Yeah, it's very small.
Okay, I'm
like
not,
probably
you know.
couldn't even find it on the map.
Well, you know what I would say about that? I got no words. Blossville, crazy place. So this is what I would ask you here. When you were growing up, how often did you guys move from home to home? Because I remember, knowing you guys a little bit, and I remember you mentioning you did move quite often.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't. I feel like I couldn't put a timeline on it because I was so young. Like, by the time I was 18, I had probably moved like 11 times in my life.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
That's
a lot of times.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And it was always from house to house.
From house to house. Yeah.
Wouldn't the moving be so like irritating?
Oh my gosh, it was impeccably annoying.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking you had to pack up, go.
Yeah.
I think I moved like 13 times by the time I was 10 years old.
Yeah,
right?
it's terrible.
I believe it was like 13 by the time I was 10 or 11, I would move. So I
Yeah.
moved quite a bit. This is what I remember. Now, I never have even gotten this verified, but I just remember constantly moving. And I personally, when you're a kid, you don't remember too much. But I remember constantly just being from like one apartment to another apartment. Then we got a house. The house is a huge deal. It was a game changer. And then out of nowhere, we're back in a small, tiny apartment, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, and I think the difference is too, Brendan, like you grew up in North Jersey, you know?
That's true.
I grew up in rural Podunk, New York, where there was no apartments. So everything was houses and they were mostly being rented.
So let me ask you a question. Did you know the people who were landlords? Did you know the landlord?
I don't think that we knew them personally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Growing up, did you know anybody who was like a real estate investor?
I only knew a real estate agent.
Okay. Who was that?
The person who was helping us rent the property.
Oh, they loved you.
Yeah.
You were the favorite client.
Literally. Favorite. They were probably the only one in the town, honestly. The only real estate agent in the town.
Oh,
yeah.
so you had very little real estate professional
Literally,
encounters.
I knew nothing.
Was this real estate agent that you knew, was it a guy, girl?
It was a girl-guy couple.
Oh, they were a powwow.
Yeah.
Married couple.
Yeah, married couple.
Dick and Jane, right?
Yeah,
Is that what it's called?
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this question. Were they well off? Did you see wow, these people are crushing it? Or
We went to their I think they were building a house. And I remember they had a lot of land, and so they had animals.
Animals?
That's all I remember. Yeah, like sheep and goats.
Okay. But they never you never saw anyone invest in real estate.
No.
Did you ever hear someone talk about real estate?
As a kid? No, I remember my mom helping. So I think my aunt may have been a real estate agent at the time, but she lived kind of far from us, maybe like an hour. So my mom would sometimes go help her stage houses for when she was doing photos. Otherwise, I had like no exposure to real estate as a child.
Your mom was staging houses. You staged some houses.
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. And now growing up, what did your parents say about real estate? Did you hear any language about like, even about like, I guess for me, I always talk about like the rent aspect, right? That's how real estate impacted me because we always rented and my mom and my dad often didn't have the means to happily pay rent.
Yeah.
So it was always like this aspect. You remember being young and there was always this aspect of like, crap, we don't, that fear, like the end of the month, like save your money, save your money, save your money, save your money. How was that for you? Did you ever end up having that? Did you feel that from like growing up or was it more like, hey, we're not really just ever talk about finance and real estate?
I think like in terms of like our housing, we didn't talk about finances. I knew that we were growing up poor and I knew that we didn't have all what all these other people had in my town. But it was never a topic of conversation. Like, I don't know how we're going to make ends meet this week, or I don't know how we're going to eat. I don't know how I'm going to pack your lunch, or I don't know how we're going to have dinner.
But they never talked about the rent aspect of it?
Never talked about the rent. The only thing I remember ever talking about with them, which is kind of funny, is I remember like asking a question about like, like how do schools get the money to pay for teachers or something along those lines. And I remember my dad saying like, oh, when you own a house, you have to pay taxes and the taxes go to the city. And I was like, so you have to pay because we live in this house. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, mom doesn't own the house that she lives in. And he said, yeah, she doesn't have to pay taxes.
Oh.
So I knew that by renting a house, that's like the only recollection I have of any real estate talk was that I knew by renting a house or renting a property, you did not have to pay taxes on that property.
Well, okay. Well, that is true.
Yeah.
But for those who are listening.
Yeah.
But, wow. Okay. But your dad did own a house then?
Yeah. My dad owned a house.
Okay. And how was that? Was there any different experience for you? Like, did your dad own one house? Did he buy multiple? Did he go from one, sell one, buy one?
No. So he owned the house that we don't have it anymore. He sold it maybe like 5 years ago.
Okay.
But when he sold that property, he bought a plot of land. But we never had more than one property at a time.
But did he have that one property for a long period of time?
Yeah, until we were out of the house. Until he probably had that for at least 10 years.
Yeah, I gotta be honest. I think that to me is like one of the most beautiful things about real estate in terms of your primary residence. It's the stability aspect. And one thing I'm realizing now with Maverick, having like a 10-month-old son, it's moving around a lot isn't the worst. It just is not the way.
Well, and I think like as children of parents who have moved around a lot, we recognize the trauma that comes along with moving.
It's just not the way.
Yeah.
I like it, trauma, it's just not good.
Yeah.
I don't know what you want to like, okay, maybe say trauma, okay, whatever. But even if it is or is not, it's just like it has not the ideal.
Yeah.
Now, I will say it is a luxury to be able to travel and that's all good. But to have a home base, to have a staple, to have hey, this is that's my tree right in the backyard. And really when you kind of really get hit by this is when you look back and it's a blur.
Yeah.
Like, where was I?
Well, I think now as someone who's dating and in a serious relationship, I think of someone like how like I have my boyfriend who's able to take me around and show me like, oh, this is where I grew up. This is this, this is this. I don't have that. I can take this person to a plot of land and say, this is where my house is, or like, we're going home for Christmas and this is the house I grew up in. And I think that's something that I recognize now that's what I've always wanted. But I think the stability aspect, like even into adulthood is really, really key.
For sure. And then you too, you're a little wanderbird, right? A wanderlust, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
So and even for me, I think the opposite, for me, I've had similar where I grew up a lot I moved a lot, but it was all within maybe a 5-10 mile radius, right? So I moved from South Jersey to North Jersey. Like my wife went from Brazil to, Jersey to Florida to the Hamptons. Like she moved to like 4 or 5 different, she moved 2 different continents, right? And then Florida is like its own state nowadays. Yeah. But the point is, for me, I just moved so often. So I can tell people, hey, this is where I was, blah, blah. But recently my wife, she took me for a drive and some of the houses, like when that was my birthday, when I was like turned 27, she took me to all these like key points in my life, like where I was born, the school I went to, and for high school, all these things. And it was a beautiful experience. Like my house in Kearney, I was kind of taken back by some of these places. I was like, wow, I forgot I lived here.
Yeah.
Huh. So for me, it's interesting because I can tour people like, yeah, that's where I played. This is where I did that. But I can show people the home. So I'm from the area, but I don't own any piece of the area. So when people say like, even in Newark, they'll be like, oh, this is my block. This is my block. That's my block. And the mayor, Ross Rockwell, will say like, is it your block? What do you own? You don't own nothing here. And he goes, so it's not your block. You don't own it.
Yeah.
And he's not saying that in a way to belittle people. He's saying that in a way to like inspire people. You got to own. So I think that that's one big thing that I've realized and how real estate impacts us as we're upbringing in our lives is that we gotta get to a place where we have home ownership and stability. And this is a big issue when it comes to like America right now with unaffordability. And ultimately, like it's pushing us to rent. Now, what's it? It is the mortgage rates. It is the market. It is the government, right, pumping in the money, blasting up prices. And then you have like private institutional, right? Vanguard, BlackRock, the whole nine. And they're buy. Then you end up just having to rent. And then you can never really have that one place unless you're renting one spot for 30 years. It's, renting is not a bad idea short term. Do it all day. Like my wife and I right now, we're renting, but we own multiple property. But renting should not be the way long term because you have no real control of stability, right? Maybe in the city.
Yeah, I think in the city it makes sense, but I
because
totally
they have the
agree
rent
with you.
control.
Yeah.
And then like you just get like you get stuck in like paying so little.
Yeah.
That's a good idea actually. Maybe if you're in
And
New York
also
City.
it depends on the city. Some cities you can't really buy unless you buy like a condo. And
I would buy a
sometimes
condo.
condos aren't the way.
You wouldn't buy a condo in DC? DC has a lot of condos.
I don't know if I would ever buy in DC.
Really?
Yeah.
Vivek just bought a great place. Your
I
boyfriend
know.
just bought a great place.
He did. He bought a great place. It's not in DC though.
Where is it?
It's in Annandale, Virginia.
Annandale?
Yeah.
How do you say that?
Annandale.
All these strange names.
Yeah. Very
Okay,
strange.
back to you. So you had that upbringing. Wonderful. When is the next time you would say real estate touched your life? And I would think it's going to be actually word of life. I'm just going to.
Well, I mean, yeah, if we want to backtrack to then, probably when I met you.
Okay, how so?
I mean, I think if we hadn't met at summer camp in 2000.
No, not like the real estate profession or the real estate industry. I think about real estate like the space and word of life. Because they own that big ranch, and that was a formative experience in your time, an island. Like that's real estate.
Yeah,
that's land.
that's true.
So tell us about that.
Okay. So Word of Life is a Christian summer camp that they have multiple properties throughout the U.S., throughout the world, honestly. And so that was a camp I attended when I was in high school. It's an island in the middle of upstate New York where they just have a bunch of high schoolers come every summer for 8 weeks. And it's an incredible formative experience for sure. I went like 4 years in a row, I think. I volunteered there.
And then you ended up working. And you ended up going to school.
Yeah, I ended up going to school. They have a Bible Institute that I ended up going to. They have one in New York and Florida for the U.S. And then they have one in like, I don't know, maybe 40 countries.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, so I went to the Florida campus for a year after high school.
And how did they get, because they have like massive, probably like, I'm assuming like 200 acres of land or 300 acres of land up in upstate Adirondack Mountains with like a whole island.
Yeah.
Probably have like more than 300 acres actually.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Honestly, they have a whole
lot
island.
of space. Yeah.
They probably have several hundred acres.
Yeah.
No, they have a lot
And
of
honestly,
land.
it was all donated to them, which is insane.
So that's what I want to hear. How does that look like? Do you know any of those stories?
I don't know. I can't remember.
For you, may I ask, like, what would you say? Because that space to me is a very sacred space.
Yeah.
That's where I came to know Christ. Where would you what was the impact you think of that particular piece of land? And if it wasn't that wonderful, wasn't that beautiful, what would be kind of the different impact that you guys had?
Yeah. So I think one thing to note specifically about the land is when you come onto the property, you literally have to be taken by boat. And so I think that's already like an incredible experience is you literally we don't take boats every day here. We drive in a car, we take a bus, we take a train, whatever. But to be taken by a boat onto an island and then to be welcomed, they have this incredible, beautiful boathouse and it says on it, a very special island. And so that's what's welcoming you when you get there. And so I think like maybe you're going there for the first time and you see that and you're like, oh, I have no idea what the heck this means, or like you don't even think about it. But to leave, hopefully, a changed person, a changed man, a changed woman, and to look back at that when you're going back to the mainland, I think is like very, very emotional, very, very like spiritual experience. And so yeah, for me, it was very, very formative. That's where I met, obviously, some of my closest friends. That's where I met you and so many other people in my life who I had the chance to work with, who I'm still in contact with. One of my friends, Olivia, I lived with her and her husband in Phoenix. We met on the island and I was in her wedding and, you know, things like that. And I think like without that place, the trajectory of my life would have been so different. which is really kind of crazy.
It is really kind of crazy. And that is once again, like, and people were once like, were generous enough to give them that land.
Yeah.
Which is such a crazy thing to me.
Yeah.
But I believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember being after like the week I got saved, I remember going tubing on the water and I saw the sun hit the water. And, I'm growing up in Jersey. I never had the means to go tubing.
Yeah.
Right. It's like I can't imagine who has a boat.
Yeah.
It was like a profound experience. And once again, it's like the land, like we're in some Western, right? Protect the land,
literally.
right? But the land is real estate and real estate impacts our lives in every single way, even how they design the cabins, right? The material, the calmness of it all.
Yeah.
And
it's
the
very peaceful. You can't have your phone.
Can't have your phone.
Like,
that's the best
crazy.
part.
Yeah.
Okay. So now fast forward to the Silva team. And I love to hear all about kind of how you've seen, because people will know like, oh, here's how we did the Airbnb and here's how we did that and here's how we did this. But what would you say behind the scenes are some things that would surprise people? We've had a lot of bad in our friendship, and actually, our friendship was very, very negatively impacted, but then actually positively impacted. But what would you say has been some of the behind the scenes takeaways that you've seen, how real estate has impacted your life in particular? And then, since you know me so well, my EA for like 2-3 years impacted my life.
I think for me, it was surprising to see just how many opportunities are out there. Like literally, I feel as though like you and I have had so many conversations and you've been like, Savannah, why don't you just whatever? And I'm like, oh, why didn't I think of that? Like there's just so much, specifically with Airbnb, I think, for example, like just like there's so many ways around it. And I think around it being like, if you don't own a property, that doesn't mean you can't do Airbnb. So I think like that has definitely changed and like grown my mind and things of that nature. What was the rest of the question? I can't remember.
What would you say? But actually, let's stay with that for a second.
Yeah.
So like you're saying that it sounds like you're saying that real estate being in the industry has impacted your mind, like being able to think bigger.
Yeah.
Would you mind talking more to that?
Yeah. So I think I think when I joined the team in November 2020. I left the team in July 2023. So almost 3 years on the team. When I joined the team in November 2020, it was a completely different team than it was when I left. And I think that's a beautiful thing. There's a lot of growth within those couple of years. But I think that in terms of expanding my mind, I was put into situations, one, where I didn't have all the answers. I know you often say never be the smartest person in the room. And I think that is like one of the things I was before I joined the team, I was oftentimes like I didn't know what I was doing, but I also didn't have someone come alongside of me and teach me and say, hey, how about you try this? And so in terms of that part of expanding my mind, that was a huge thing. But then also just being in a collaborative environment where it's like every single person is like striving for a common goal. And that common goal is to sell or buy real estate or do something within that like mindset. I think like I came from a nonprofit world. I came from like a bunch of different avenues of career. That was a huge difference, is that kind of every person was looking to do the same exact thing. And so with that, I think when we all have the same mentality and the same goal in mind, then we're all automatically going to be kind of thinking in the same direction, and everybody has a different brain. So we're able to collaborate and come up with different ideas. So I think just being around people who have a different brain than me, have different ideas than I do, allowed me to kind of expand my own brain and kind of exercise a muscle that I wasn't used to using.
Do you think you would have had that in a different space though, or was this particular to real estate?
I think different space for sure, but I think like I wasn't in a different space. This is where I was. I was in real estate. I didn't have another opportunity that I could have even chosen from. So
yeah, I would say too, though, I think honestly, it's kind of like, cheerlead for real estate. I think real estate industry as a whole, it does have such an eclectic like roster of people.
Yeah, for sure.
So like even on our team, right, we had like, not only socioeconomically diverse, we had faith that, that we had really like a lot of different views. And most importantly, like you're saying, a lot of different personalities with even further different amount of skill sets.
Yeah.
So I think like being in the real estate space, and especially being on this team where it's young and people are willing to grow and everyone's still molding, like the person that you met, the person that you're working with 6 months from now isn't going to be the person you're still working with now, even though it's the same physical person.
Yeah. I actually think I've never been in an industry long enough, aside from real estate, long enough to really meet someone else and be like, oh, what do you do for work? And them tell me, I do this and I'm doing the same thing as them. So I think like my experience in real estate is like, I think about my current landlord, and I think about specifically one other person who after I had left the team, I was sitting at a coffee shop. I was working on some Airbnb stuff, and I was sitting outside, and this woman is sitting at a table next to me, and I hear her answer the phone, and she's talking about GSMLS. And I'm like, and then I looked at her afterwards, and then I got on a phone call with someone here on the team, and I was talking about something regarding real estate. And then she was like, "Oh, are you in real estate?" And I was like, "I am. I heard you say,
bang, bang.
you know." And so I think like when you meet, I don't know what it's like in other industries, but I think specifically for real estate, there's such a connection. Like you feel like you're like family with them.
You know,
and you can carry a conversation. And like even my landlord now, like I'm trying to get him to allow me to arbitrage my Airbnb arbitrage my house that I'm living in, and he's totally fine with it. But
once you've gotten, it's like, I don't want to be like dramatic, but when you get into real estate industry, if you really want to succeed, if you end up, so happens. They say it's a bug, right? Mm-hmm. Once you catch the bug from real estate, right? Whether it's investing, whether it's working in the industry, whatever it is, once you catch that bug, real estate will impact your life because you then join a cult.
Yeah.
And the cult is just like, oh,
that's
I'm a real estate guy. Like I couldn't do, even if you brought me into like anything, I would just always want to talk about real estate. Because real estate is like, it becomes more
it's what
than
you know. It's part of you.
It's what you know. And honestly, you're right. Like it's such a challenging experience that you find so much like the people who I find understand me the most are people in the real estate space. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's very challenging. Like I have an amazing pastor, unbelievable. I love him, bless him, whatever. But I always think there's like a gap, right? So how he can understand from me. So even in the real estate industry where there's a counterpart where there's not a faith, where the person who I'm speaking to may not be faith-based, but they understand what it's like to be, hustling, to be in real estate, to want to get better every single day. That the money isn't getting you anywhere anymore. So I think you're right. It's almost like trauma bonding.
Yeah, it is. That's very true. That's actually very true. And even just in my experience, like obviously you have thousands of hours more of experience than I do, but in my small, minute experience with real estate that I have, like I remember we went to like a conference or some kind of something that we went to for Airbnb where you're presenting, and just the conversations that I was able to have as someone, I think at the time I had only been like maybe a year and a half in to real estate and like maybe a couple months into doing Airbnb, like the conversations I was able to have, I remember leaving that experience and being like, I just did that. Like I just had those conversations, and like just being able to hold that and being able to relate with people on that level, I think is really, really, really special and very unique specifically to real estate.
Very, and because it's just a camaraderie.
Yeah.
It's more than trauma bonding actually.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, it's like,
it's like you shared a womb.
I'm not
the womb of real estate.
Can I tell you the best idea?
Sure.
It's like you shared a foxhole.
Okay.
Like you're getting shot at, you're shooting the bad guys, you're in war and you're fighting, and then you come home and you see someone who has, and I shout out to the veterans, war heroes. And I'm making like a very bad comparison right now, I'm realizing. But the idea is this. It's like when you see someone, it's like, better example. It's like someone from when you go to college with somebody and then like, oh, wait, you went there?
Yes,
I went there too. Yes. But it's like that college experience, but worldwide industry experience.
Yeah.
So you're in real estate, I'm in real estate too. Oh my gosh, what's going on?
Yeah.
Talk to me. Blah. And one thing I love about the real estate, at least my space in the real estate world, right, is that there's so much collaboration. It's with Keller Williams for sure. It's like anytime I meet a KW agent, they're never like, oh, here are my secrets.
Yeah.
Here's like my craft. Oh,
well, and I think that's what I felt too when I was here. I was like, there's just so many, like, especially with KW, like, especially with co-brokers and things like that. It's like, hey, how are you doing this? I'm having trouble in this area. Can you help me? Can you tell me how you're doing this? That is a really, really beautiful thing. Because there is competition, but not competition to an extent of like, I'm going to hide my secrets and I can't let you in.
Yeah, it's not like a zero-sum game. It's
exactly.
like, I want you to win and I'll win.
Yeah.
So like we can both win.
Exactly.
It's not like one of us
like
must
there's
lose.
enough food in the kitchen for everybody.
Oh, for everybody.
Yeah.
And then some.
Yeah.
And then some.
Yeah.
Okay. So wow, very, very, very good. I agree 100%. So that's what real estate kind of impacted you in your mind, like blowing up. Is there any other way? Because real estate also took like, and not just real estate, also like the Silva team, right? And not only just the Silva team, myself, really like overworked you to like the brim of death, right? So tell us about what you would caution people and of your own personal experience when it comes to how real estate industry can impact you. in terms
For
of like your
good,
work
for better,
life?
for worse?
For the worse.
For
in
the
this
worst.
case. So that was the
So
better.
you want me to just say all the bad things?
Well, not all the bad things, but some.
But
yes.
some of them. Okay. I think it's really easy to want to take everything on and to be, for me, for example, like I really wanted to be the hero. I wanted to be the one to save the day. I wanted to be the one to be like, no, I did that. Like, and so I think it's in my position. I mean, I wasn't an agent or anything like that, but in my role of director of operations / executive assistant, like I wanted to be the one who was like, I am so thankful that I had a part in that and that it was successful. And so with that, I took on a lot. I took on, and I never took off. I never said no. I never said no because I wanted to be like, no, I can handle this. And I think that goes back to some things when I was a child and, things like that. But I do think that there is like some truth in that, in specifically for my role as director of operations and EA in real estate, is that it's really, really easy to want to do it all, especially when we're trying to run a team and we're trying to build and we're trying to grow. That's one thing I would say is I never said no. I think also learning to delegate could have helped with that. Like I didn't delegate to anyone. I wanted to do it myself. And the truth of the matter is my shoulders just aren't that strong. So that's one thing.
Well, can we stay on there for a second?
Sure.
Once again, is that specific to real estate, that experience of like, hey, I'm just taking on? Or is there anything unique to real estate that exacerbated that to you?
I think that the real estate industry can be very demanding. And it never shuts off. It's 24/7, like clients can call you at 9 PM. They can call you at 9 AM. They can call you at 3 AM. Like, especially if they have your cell phone number, like you are inaccessible to them unless you set up boundaries. So I think that's one thing that is like very specific to real estate is that like you can make yourself indispensable, which is a very dangerous place to be. If you want to, like, which I don't know why anyone would want to do that, but
I myself want to be indispensable to my clients for sure.
Yeah.
But not myself, like the value I provide.
Right.
So like the team, support, etc.
Right.
But I think you said it on the head. It's because real estate's so demanding and there is no end.
Yeah.
Like there's never, okay, well, we're done. No, you can always grow. It's exciting, right?
Yeah, it's very
exciting.
exciting.
You can always grow. You can always get better. Wow. At the same time, it's like Icarus, right? You will fly too close to the sun and you will get burned down and die.
Exactly.
So if you don't pace yourself, if you don't like gauge your stomach, like my dog, if we give him like a ton of food, guess what he'll do? He'll eat all the food. He'll literally erupt his stomach eating the food. Why? He can't stop.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying is like, for whether it's like, hey, we're trying to prove ourselves, hey, we're afraid, hey, we're ashamed, whatever it is, we're trying to build our worth, good and bad.
Yeah.
Gotta say, hey, what if I didn't grow next year? That's okay.
Yeah. And I think like not necessarily like specific to real estate, but I think like just where the team was, when I was here, like there was such room for growth. Like we were babies, as individuals and
That's
as
company.
a team, like we had no clue what we were doing. We were still trying to learn. There was so much to do, so much to learn. And so I think with that just added on so much work and so much potential growth opportunity. Whereas maybe even now it's a little bit less because we've gotten to a point of maybe more so of a plateau with a slight incline. Yeah. But when I was here, it was just incline, like 90 degrees.
Just we're growing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The rapid growth, they say the sound of rapid growth is like the sound of rapid growth in a business is a lack of cash flow and an increase in stress, right? Like a demanding increase in stress. So that is like the experience of rapid growth. Yeah. And that's the cost. Anyone in business will tell you if you're like, everyone be like, oh my God, you're growing so quickly. It's like, well, yeah, because it cost me a ton of money to grow as quickly.
But at what cost? Well, it's literally, you think of someone who has a growth spurt. There's like medically speaking, people who go through growth spurts end up breaking their bones because their body cannot adjust to the rate in which their body is growing.
Are you telling me if I go through a growth spurt, my bone's going to break?
Well, not like there are growth spurts that do happen and it's called a growth spurt. Like, like if you grow 5 inches in the summer, 5 inches in a year, like that's a growth spurt. But I think there is like a medical term that is a growth spurt and it's like they literally grew too fast and their bones broke.
Oh, like the bone wasn't strong enough to sustain the growth.
Yeah, exactly.
So that is a great analogy for us.
Yeah.
And like your time and how real estate impacted you because you broke and then I broke with it. And then the company broke 3 to 4 times over.
Yeah.
And then once again, real lives of real estate. This is what happens.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think like for that example, like if you think of like me breaking and then you breaking and then the company breaking, like I thought my back was strong enough to carry all of
Yeah.
that. And the truth is like no one's person back
No.
is strong enough for that.
You were it's like it's weird. There's a saying. It's like we drastically overestimate what we can do in 1 year, and we drastically underestimate what we could do in 10.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm just like, because reality, we want it all now.
Yeah.
And it's like Warren Buffett, for example, right? Uncle Warren, right? The whole joke. But Warren Buffett, he was investing for like decades, and he only really got famous in his like later half of his life. But he was in the industry investing for decades. He was just going slow and steady. And who wants to be slow and steady? Nobody. We want to be,
Right.
like fast growth,
Yeah.
rapid expansion. Where right now, like I was talking to our leadership team, and my whole thing's like, okay, what if we didn't grow next year?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's target 20% growth. Great. What if we didn't do it though and just went 1% better?
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically you're saying that real estate really impacted you because it was all consuming. It broke a bone in you.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree more. I've been there. I often have been there. What would you say is another way for the negative that real estate industry impacted your personal life?
Oh, my personal life? I think I was so exhausted from working, from answering calls, from doing all this stuff on the team and from real estate that I literally I would get home from work on a Friday night and I would look in my apartment and I would say, I do not have even the energy to clean up this house. Like I do not have the energy to go grocery shopping. And so I think like that starts to snowball into like 1, living in a messy space, 2, eating out because there's not enough, like I don't have enough time or enough time/energy to go to the store and get groceries. And so I think like personally, like it did start to affect my physical health. 1, eating out, 2,
True.
like, and then also with the living in a messier space, like my mental health. Because when you live in a cleaner space, you just tend to have like better mental health. And so like in terms of like my personal life, that was like definitely one way that started to affect me. I was completely exhausted all the time. I found that I was a little bit harsh towards people when I had no reason to be, just like friends and family. I would just kind of like snap back at them.
Oh yeah. Irritability.
Very irritable. So yeah, like just working so much to the point of literally breaking the signs. I should have paid attention to the signs of, like I said, eating out, no time, being exhausted, all of these different things. And really just not allowing myself to have time to like refocus, rest, take Sabbath and like enjoy life, where I was like really letting life take me when I should have been taking life.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Where would you say that real estate has impacted your relationship? Because you are in a relationship. The guy Vivek, shout out Vivek, love you. Also shout out Mama Kay if you're listening.
Shout out.
Love you, Mama Kay. Where would you say that real estate has impacted your relationship? Because you started dating Vivek while you were here.
Yeah.
On the team, right?
Yeah.
So how was that?
I was on the team while we were dating. I think in the beginning of our relationship, I was so stressed and so tired that he told me that he was like really questioning kind of like not my personality, but kind of my personality just because he
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. He was like, Savannah, I would get on the phone with you. Cause we were long distance at the time. And, he would get on the phone with me and be like, you were so like emotional and so like I said, irritable. And so like almost manic, honestly. And he was like, I didn't know what I signed up for because that's not who the person was that I met 2 years. We met 2 years before we started dating. And so now I'm like a completely different person because I've had that time to kind of rest and recuperate and be Savannah again. But, so that definitely affected our relationship in the beginning, probably the first 3 to 4 months, because of just the amount of stress that I was taking on. But then also I think positively it affected our relationship as well, because like you mentioned, he just bought a house in July. And so was able to kind of come alongside him in that and talk to him about things that if I wasn't in real estate, I would literally have no idea. I would have no clue like what an interest rate was or maybe I would know what an interest rate was, but like, you know what I mean? That's a thing
too though. So pause real quick. So you had like both, right? You have the negative aspect where he's literally, and my wife will tell you, and one thing that I hate with all my soul is when my wife doesn't want to call me at work. Cause she's like, oh, you're like, have your work voice on. And to me, I'm like, and it's just like the worst feeling, right? Yeah. Cause I know exactly what she means, right? I think we all know exactly. Okay, Brandon, talk to you later. You're like scared. You're just like,
yes. Yeah.
So you have that energy. And then, which is just heartbreaking. And then what you're saying also with Vivek, you had the opportunity to kind of, be a person of value
Yeah.
in I would say the largest financial decision of his life.
Yeah, for sure.
And now with that being said, I got to imagine that's a sense of empowerment for you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. The amount of connection that I felt to him because of like just being able to speak into that in his life. Like, he doesn't come from a real estate background at all. Like, like his parents have bought and sold a couple properties, but like aside from that, like he doesn't really have anyone in his life who was directing him other than his agents. And so I think I've never bought a property, but I think depending on the agent you're working with, you may feel a little bit like, are they trying to pull a fast one on me? Things like that. Like, I think that's just natural human nature. But to have him come and ask me questions and me have the answer, or me be able to provide insight into what he was questioning or what he was wondering, was extremely empowering. And just like I mentioned, just the connection that it brought, like, I think that's really, really special.
Well, I love this. Well, what kind of person would you recommend get into real estate?
Any person.
No.
like any person.
Okay. What would you say someone, like, what are some of the key impacts that someone could, expect in their personal life if they're getting into real estate industry?
Good and bad.
Good and bad.
I think
you're new. You're fresh off the boat.
Yeah, this is just the reality of it.
Gone to the land. It's D-Day. Bah, bah, bah.
Yeah. I think like increased stress for sure. Just naturally, this is a very stressful industry. But I think if you can learn to manage it, I think you recently have learned to manage very well.
Thank you. I'm learning.
And I think that's a roller coaster. I think there will be, seasons of very good stress management and seasons where it's not so good. So I think learning to manage your stress, I think that's the type of person you have to be able to do that. Time, you have to be very like on time person. Do not be late. Because one thing that you taught me that I take into consideration almost every time I'm going to meet someone is, I remember when we used to take on rentals and we would be trying to find tenants for some of our landlords, and the landlords would be there. We'd be there. We would say, okay, we're going to meet at 9 a.m. The tenant would show up. It's 9:01. We'd leave. We'd say, I'm sorry, you were late. You were late to this signing of the lease. We can't take you on as a tenant, because if you're going to be late to signing the lease, you're going to be late on your rent. Oof. And so I remember that impacting me so much. And like, obviously, like 3 years later, I still remember it. But so I think you have to be on time, because think of the person on the other side. Think of the seller or the buyer who's waiting for you and you're 10 minutes late. And it's like, oh, well, if you can't show up to my appointment on time, am I going to be able to contact you when I need to, or when I have a question? So I think that's one thing. Like, you need to be able to manage your time well. You need to be able to manage your stress well. I think you need to be hardworking, and I think everyone probably thinks they're hardworking, but I mean, like, you've got to be full of grit. You've got to be. I was gonna say grit. You've got to be someone who, like, you're gonna get beat up, you're gonna get punched in the head, you're gonna get your nose broken, but you got to be willing to get back up and try again, because it is a brutal industry.
It is, and at the same time, real estate has impacted my life in such profoundly positive ways. It has given me such really, the Lord's used it for me to bless others, bless myself, bless my family. And it's such an abundant industry, and it's such honestly a wonderful industry. And it's weird that I think I'm lying to myself when I say stuff, but then I remember, wait, no, both can be true. Yeah. It can be brutal. You do need to show up on time, but guess what? The world is brutal. Yeah. The world is tough. Yeah. There is no easy way out. Yeah. Right? And there's literally no easy way out. Yeah. And even about being on time. This week I was late to an appointment. And
it happens.
And the guy literally said, I'm sorry, I was 20 minutes late. I wasn't a little late. I was 27 minutes late. And he left. And he's like, I'm not coming back, wasting my time. I'm not gonna work with you. And I'm over there, I'm pissed. I'm like, man, I'm late because I'm interviewing a position so that when we work with you, we can be better. And I'm late because of the traffic. I'm late because of this. And no, I'm late because I didn't budge well. Right. I wasn't proactive.
And clients want to feel like they're priority. And so if you're not prioritizing their time, why should they give you their business?
And also, I wouldn't work with someone who's 25 minutes late, 25 minutes late. No way. I'd be like, guy, peace. I'm not wasting. You crazy? Exactly. So with that being said, I do agree with you, and it's not binary. Both things can be true. Like, you can't have a really difficult, heartbreaking industry that also gives your heart so much life. And when you realize that, you actually are able, in my experience, to live a fuller life. Yeah, honestly. Yeah. So no, but it is really beautiful though to see from your perspective, because I've seen so much. Those are your takeaways, because that is how real estate really does impact people's lives, and especially your first 2 years in the business. Especially your first 2 years there, that's for sure. Yeah. And now on a separate thread, where are you living now? Because
Oh, wow.
let's talk about your physical space is
Yeah.
real estate, right?
Yeah.
So how is your physical space right now? How do you like it? I know you're in DC. How,
Mm-hmm.
like it could be like your physical space you live in, or just even the city and town around it.
Yeah, so I live in a suburb of DC, and I live in a house.
And you used to live in Newark.
I used to live in Newark,
And
right
like a
down the
loft.
street, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
very,
a
very
loft.
cool, very, very cool studio apartment. Lived in Newark. I lived there for a year.
Brick walls.
Literally,
It was
like,
a
was an
carriage
old
house.
carriage house. Great landlord, great neighbors. It was really, really awesome.
And you would say that was in your new experience in Newark.
That was my Newark experience.
Okay,
Yeah.
great landlords, great neighborhood.
Yeah.
Which is funny because your block in particularly is
It was a rough block.
literally a rough block.
Yeah.
So what makes you say that?
Oh, you want to know how rough my block was?
Tell me.
I went out of my house one morning. It was actually a very rainy day.
Rainy day?
And I walked outside and I looked across the street and I was like, oh, I'm so glad like that's not my car. And then I looked and it was my car, and the entire front driver's side was completely smashed, totaled. And I was like, oh, so that's what it's like.
On that block.
Yeah, on that block.
And
So-
you got what was it? Hit and run?
It was a hit and run.
The guy left a note.
The
or
guy,
no?
no.
Did you find the guy?
No. Called the police. They didn't do much. If I'm being honest.
Newark PD, we
Honestly,
love you.
they probably have bigger fish to fry. But
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, so that was rough. But thankfully, my insurance was really good, so they were able to help me out. But no, I did love my experience in Newark. I lived in a very quiet studio. Literally, like I could throw a rock and hit it from here, so it was very close.
And so, but overall, I then would say the neighborhood wasn't that good.
No,
If
the
you got
neighborhood's
hit
not
by-
good.
Okay, the neighbor was good. The neighborhood wasn't.
Yes, neighbors were great.
Okay, neighbors
had
were
really great
Gotcha.
neighbors.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about Newark that I've loved. Like the people you live next to are like really, really awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's the people that drive through that I'm like, okay, can you stay like elsewhere?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because I think people come to Newark and they expect.
Yeah, I don't know.
Something
They
different.
have this is.
But where I live now, I live in a house in DC area, and I'm renting a room there. I'm renting the basement. So
Okay.
it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house. I'm renting the basement, and the area is amazing. It's really, really walkable.
Mm-hmm.
Very, I would say it's a metropolitan area, but I wouldn't call it urban. If that makes sense. A lot of like business, but I also think DC is so different from
It's
Newark.
like a suburb.
It's a suburb.
Okay,
yeah.
suburb vibe. Okay.
Yeah.
And now, would you say that in what ways have you living in a suburb real estate environment, right? Neighborhood. What ways has it impacted you differently than living in the city environment?
Yeah. So the suburb, I'm recognizing how much more expensive it is. It is incredibly expensive. The house I'm living in is worth almost $1 million, and it is not anything fancy at all. A house down the street, 2 houses down from me, just sold for $2.8 million. Not a fancy house. This market is really hot right now, you know? And I think the Newark market is really hot right now. And I think like, so just recognizing like, these prices are pretty hefty comparatively, you know? And so why is that? And so looking into that and just trying to see like, this is very interesting.
Yeah, definitely interesting. You're basically getting exposed to larger amounts of money.
Yeah.
So what I encourage you is that you have the opportunity but you've already like developed like, whoa, there's a big abundant world there with a lot of money changing hands at all the time. Your goal is this: anytime there's an exchange of money, how can I get a piece?
Well, yeah, that's my mindset.
Yeah.
How can I Airbnb this?
Yes.
You know, if I don't have the
Every
money to buy,
single
how
time.
can I Airbnb this?
Yeah.
How can I Airbnb
Even
this?
there in DC, you should get your license. Like, okay, that person sold their house.
Yeah.
Well, that means I'm assuming there was a realtor involved, right? So why not get there? And I think that's really how real estate impacts your. If there's one way that I would love to see real estate in your experience, because we're talking more about the industry of real estate rather than personal life. We're talking personal too, though. Is the real estate industry, what I hope it does, I hope it impacts you in a way that at all times you think like advantageously to oneself.
For sure.
So like almost like a greed
Yeah.
that I hope it instills in you.
It's a selfish mentality of thinking like, okay, my landlord is renting, you know, for my personal experience, my landlord is renting out this entire house, but he's also renting individual rooms. There's 4 people that live in that house. He's not renting to one family. So how can I, as a tenant of that house, take advantage of maybe 2 rooms or even the whole house? Or how can I take advantage of this so that I have at the end of the day more money in my pocket?
So you're saying selfish? It's actually, why I challenge you in there, it's not selfish. Like real estate, what I hope it teaches is like it's actually, it's selfish of you not to do it. Because if you don't do it, your landlord is going to have the risk of getting bad tenants who don't pay. If you don't do it, your future family is not going to have the financial position to be able to thrive.
Right.
And you're going to have another Savannah who moved 10 times or 10 times, I believe it was.
Something like this.
Yeah. Something like that. 10 times or 13 times by the time you were 18 or 10 times by the time you were 18. So you're going to have another young daughter or young son who's going to feel that way. So the most selfish thing you can do is not take action to like expand your wealth and really build more value in the world.
I think I used to look at it selfishly, and now I'm in the mindset of like, I'm learning to look at it as an opportunity rather than how can I take advantage. It's never taking advantage, but it can feel that way in the beginning.
If you think about how like rich people are depicted in movies, right? How are rich people depicted?
Very like greedy, wealthy,
evil, cartoon.
Yeah.
Right? Who's the enemy for, like, just watch this. Who's the enemy for Batman? Who's the enemy for Superman? Lex Luthor, right?
I don't know.
Lex Luthor. Okay. Superman was my favorite superhero ever. You have Clark Kent, and that was a cool thing, right? But what? Lex Luthor, who's what? This billionaire guy, and he's the evil one. And then you look at thing as Spider-Man, right? Right in the Marvel universe. Yeah. And what did you see there? Who's his enemy? The Green Goblin?
Yeah.
Osborn?
Yeah.
Right? So you see that he's a billionaire. So oftentimes, and then you get Batman, right? Batman's depicted as what? Well, Batman's rich. What are you talking about? Yeah. Well, though Batman was rich, right? What ends up happening? The superhero is not Batman,
right?
The rich guy,
right?
That's actually like he actually hates that.
Yeah.
He paints Batman,
his alter ego.
Yeah, his alter ego, Bruce Wayne, right? Bruce Wayne is this guy who's like this rich, playboy, blah 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 blah, like obnoxious. So we really don't grow up seeing people with wealth as something good. We see it as something bad. So our money story, and that was from a really great pastor down in Florida who taught me that with superheroes, but. We don't see wealth as something good, especially when you grew up in low income. Yeah. We see wealth as something, well, you're much better than me.
Frivolous.
Yeah.
That's what it's viewed as.
Oh, yeah. And it's almost like I'm not good enough for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And like, so there's a shame aspect to it. And there's like, well, I'm not going to go out and take that. Whereas like the people who build wealth, they go out and they take by creating. They create value and they are compensated in money.
Yeah.
So that's the same thing with you. I think you're such a person of value. So, but it's the shame aspect that we have to take away. And that's what real estate did in my life. And it's the view of like our money story that we really have to diagnose, like really dissect and be like, wait, what happened here?
Yeah.
And move on from that place. Anyways, Savannah, great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you. This is fun.
Welcome to the Real Lives of Real Estate. We're glad to have you. You're part of my real life and a part of my real estate journey. Such a friend and dear to my heart. So yes. Okay, guys. Savannah is not really active on social media, but if she was active on social media.
I'm very active.
You are very active?
I'm very, well, I post once a month on my grid.
Yeah, I don't know. This is
I don't know what you
posting
call
once active. A month. Once a month post is not very active.
I'll become more active for the fans.
For the podcast.
For the podcast.
Okay, great. What's your podcast? What's your Instagram?
My Instagram is @naturallysav_.
Wow, naturally sav.
Yeah.